yourself and go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Paul Schnell, Commissioner at the Department of Corrections. I want to thank you, Representative Tapke, for being willing to bring this bill forward. It is, as mentioned, it is not new, but I recognize that we have new members, and for those in the public who would benefit from some background and context. I'll start by giving some background on the current systems for determining parole in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, as I've mentioned before, is a determinant sentencing state, meaning that we know what that sentence will be. However, since 1980, those sentenced to life with the possibility of parole must appear before the Commissioner of Corrections for a life sentence review hearing. We begin seeing these folks at 3 years prior to their minimum term of confinement. When the court sentences someone to life, there are really two options: a life without the possibility of parole, or life with the possibility of parole. For those sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, the law is clear that they must serve a mandatory minimum 30 years in today's law, and then have the opportunity to review under a process and criteria codified in statute and rule for the possibility of parole release. Minnesota has approximately 600 people serving life sentences in our state. 150 of those people are serving life without the possibility of parole sentences. As Representative Tapke mentioned, Minnesota is one of only 4 states where a single person makes these parole decisions. There are many safeguards in place in our law and in the administrative rules that allow for and require careful review of release decisions, where victims are consulted, a public safety risk is assessed, and full psychological evaluations are done along with the review of their prison adjustment. And statutorily, these decisions have to be made. However, the current structure makes it challenging to ensure consistency and objectivity in the parole decision-making process. There are significant differences that often come with the approach and interpretation of laws governing life sentences. To illustrate the differences and challenges, we looked at and analyzed data that speaks to the high level of variation in the single-person decision-making approach. Over a 20-year period, 3 commissioners reviewed people for parole. 63% of the people granted parole were granted parole by just two commissioners. This is not an indictment of any administration, but instead highlights the challenges presented with making these difficult decisions for a single decision maker. HF 1321, before you, establishes this Indeterminate Sentence Release Board, ISRB, made up of a panel of 5 qualified individuals, 4 which would be appointed by the governor from recommendations that are made by each of the majority and minority leaders of the House and the Senate, and the Commissioner of Corrections serves as the 5th member and chair. The bill simply expands who conducts the reviews and makes release decisions, not who should be eligible for a review and possible release. The bill creates this panel of experts with the right qualifications selected by leadership of legislative branch and the governor to do what is currently the sole responsibility of the commissioner. We believe that shared, transparent decision-making in these really difficult situations should be made in the most obvious way possible and in accordance with Minnesota law and in a way that promotes fair and balanced approach. A panel approach to decision-making will reduce bias, increase diversity of perspective, and strengthen understanding of correctional policy, resulting in more fair and equitable decision-making. I thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to stand for any questions you or the members may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I don't believe we have any other testifiers